Good morning, everyone. Have you ever felt the weight of silence that lingers when you're alone for too long? That deep, echoing quiet that can either bring clarity or loneliness. Today, I want to explore what happens when you are alone for a long time and what you may soon become. Because solitude is powerful, but like all power, it can either shape you or break you. There is a certain silence that only solitude brings. It's not the absence of sound, but rather the absence of distraction, the quieting of the world's demands, opinions, and expectations. When you are alone for a long time, that silence begins to uncover things you've buried under the noise. You begin to feel the weight of your own presence. You are no longer performing for anyone, no longer adjusting yourself to fit into rooms or conversations. And in that stillness, the process of self-discovery begins, slowly, sometimes painfully, but always profoundly. At first, the experience can feel unsettling. Without the noise of daily interaction, the mind turns inward. Thoughts you've long ignored resurface. Emotions you pushed aside demand attention. Memories you thought were forgotten become vivid again. This can feel overwhelming, even frightening, because you are finally forced to sit with yourself without filters, without distractions, without the comfort of denial. It is in this emotional and psychological rawness that you begin to peel away the layers of who you are. You may start to question your past choices. Were they truly your own, or were they shaped by others' expectations? Did you choose that career path because you wanted to, or because it made others proud? Were the people you called friends truly aligned with your values, or simply convenient companions? These questions are uncomfortable, but they are the birthplace of growth. Solitude has a way of making you interrogate your identity, where it came from and whether it still serves you. In solitude, you also begin to notice the patterns in your thoughts. Maybe you realize how critical you are of yourself, how quickly your mind jumps to fear or judgment. Or perhaps you discover an inner dialogue that is more compassionate than you expected. Either way, you become aware of how you treat yourself when no one else is watching, and this awareness can be transformative. You begin to see how your internal world shapes your external reality, your decisions, your relationships, even your view of the future. Without the pressure to perform or please, you may discover parts of yourself that had been silenced. Passions that were once dismissed as impractical suddenly feel possible again. Dreams you shelved long ago begin to call out to you. Talents you never took seriously start to emerge. In the privacy of your own space, you are free to explore and experiment. You don't need permission, you don't need applause, you just need curiosity and time. As the days stretch on, solitude can bring a clearer understanding of your values. What truly matters to you when no one is around to influence your answer? Is it freedom, authenticity, creativity, connection? You begin to recognize what you've been chasing and whether it's been fulfilling. Often you'll find that the things you've been running toward were just shadows of what you truly needed. And with that realization, priorities begin to shift. You may also come face to face with your fears, the fear of failure, of being unloved, of not being enough. Solitude does not protect you from these fears. It shines a spotlight on them, but in seeing them clearly, you begin to understand them. You trace their roots. You find out when and why they first took hold. And as you become more intimate with your fears, they lose some of their power over you. You realize that fear is not a sign of weakness, but a teacher pointing you toward where healing is needed. Finally, solitude helps you see your story more clearly. Without the constant editing that comes with social interaction, you begin to acknowledge your past in its full truth, both the beauty and the pain. You stop minimizing your struggles. You stop exaggerating your triumphs. You learn to hold your narrative honestly, and in doing so, you start to reclaim ownership of it. This is not the end of the journey of self-discovery, but it is the beginning of a more authentic relationship with yourself. One rooted not in what the world reflects back at you, but in what you've come to know in the quiet moments alone. Time spent alone has a way of testing your emotional limits. At first, it may seem like a temporary state, something to be endured until social connection returns. But as the days stretch on, solitude becomes a mirror reflecting not only your thoughts, but your inner strength. You begin to feel the pressure that comes from carrying your emotions without sharing them. There's no one to distract you from your own sadness or to lighten your anxiety with a casual conversation. You are left to manage these feelings on your own, and in that effort, a deeper kind of resilience is either born or broken. Emotional resilience isn't something you're simply born with. It's developed, tested, and earned over time. When you are alone, you don't have the usual coping tools society provides. There's no one to lean on in moments of doubt, no immediate affirmation from others to validate your choices, no comforting routines dictated by group dynamics. Instead, you have to rely on your internal resources, and if those resources are weak or underdeveloped, being alone will expose the gaps. It will show you where you're vulnerable. But paradoxically, that exposure is the first step to strengthening them. This kind of solitude becomes an emotional gym. Each day that you face your feelings without external help is a small weight lifted. You build mental stamina by waking up and pushing through the quiet, by managing your moods without anyone asking if you're okay, by facing fears that no one even knows you're battling. It's hard. Some days feel unbearable, but each time you survive one of those days, your emotional muscles get just a little bit stronger, even if you don't realize it in the moment. However, solitude doesn't guarantee strength. Left unchecked, loneliness can easily turn into emotional decay. If you spend too much time feeding your mind with hopeless thoughts, reliving regrets, or soaking in self-pity, your emotional framework can start to crumble. Vulnerability becomes fragility. You may become hypersensitive, anxious, withdrawn, or even emotionally numb. That's the other side of solitude. It can weaken you just as easily as it can strengthen you, depending on how you use it. And often, the difference lies in your mindset and your habits. Building emotional resilience in solitude means you must learn how to self-regulate. You begin to notice what triggers certain emotions, what makes you spiral, what lifts you up, what grounds you. You may start keeping a journal, meditating, exercising, or even just walking outdoors to find some kind of rhythm in the chaos. These small acts of emotional management become your tools, your lifelines. Over time, they become ingrained responses, helping you not only to survive your solitude, but to grow through it. You also start to recognize how dependent you might have been on others for emotional balance. This realization can be humbling. It's easy to think of yourself as independent until you no longer have someone to vent to or distract you from discomfort. In that vacuum, you are faced with the task of learning to self-soothe, to calm yourself down, to reassure yourself, to motivate yourself. This doesn't mean cutting off others forever. It simply means learning to stand on your own emotional feet, which is a necessary foundation for lasting strength. As you continue to navigate life alone, emotional resilience begins to take on a quiet dignity. You may not shout about your struggles or advertise your victories, but you know what you've endured. You know how many mornings you had to push yourself out of bed without encouragement. You remember the moments you broke down and still found a way to keep going. There is a calm internal confidence that begins to emerge, an understanding that you can survive things that once terrified you. And slowly, emotional resilience evolves into emotional wisdom. You no longer just react, you reflect. You don't panic at every challenge because you've weathered storms with no one but yourself to rely on. You understand your emotional landscape in a more intimate way. You anticipate your highs and lows, and you no longer fear them as much. You've begun to accept them as part of your rhythm. And with that acceptance comes a deeper strength, one that isn't loud but is deeply rooted and quietly unshakable. There is an ancient truth embedded deep within us. Human beings are wired for connection. From the moment we are born, we seek it. As infants, we cry out for a caregiver's touch, a voice, a presence. As children, we gravitate toward companionship, and as adults, even those who consider themselves independent or introverted still feel the pull of belonging. It's not just emotional, it's biological. We are social creatures. And when that connection is absent for too long, something inside us begins to wither. In the early stages of solitude, the absence of people can feel like a relief. There's freedom in not having to perform or explain yourself and having time to think without interruption. But over time, that same silence begins to press in. Days stretch without meaningful interaction. Meals are eaten in silence. Ideas go unshared. Laughter becomes rare. The small rituals of connection, a greeting, a glance, a shared story, begin to feel like luxuries you once took for granted. And as they disappear, you begin to feel the ache of something missing. Long-term loneliness isn't simply an emotional discomfort. It affects the body as well. Studies have shown that chronic loneliness increases stress hormones, weakens the immune system, and heightens the risk of anxiety and depression. The brain interprets isolation as a form of danger, triggering a fight or flight response. We were not meant to exist in prolonged social drought. And when the mind and body are starved of human connection, even the smallest gestures of warmth, eye contact, a kind word, a gentle touch, begin to feel like vital nourishment. As time passes, the need for connection becomes sharper and more pronounced. You might find yourself yearning for conversations, even with strangers. You begin to crave shared spaces, not for the noise, but for the presence of others. You notice the energy in laughter that's not your own. You might scroll through old photos, reread old messages, or replay memories in your head, not just to reminisce, but to remind yourself that you once belonged somewhere, that you were once part of something greater than yourself. This longing isn't weakness, it's human. The desire to be seen, heard, and understood is not some flaw in our design. It is part of our survival instinct. Connection gives context to our existence. When you tell someone your thoughts, they echo back with perspective. When someone listens to your pain, it feels lighter. When you share joy, it grows. Alone, experiences feel incomplete, like music with no audience. It is only through connection that life begins to feel whole. But this need for connection also comes with complexity. After a long period of isolation, re-entering the social world can feel daunting. You may feel out of practice or unsure of what to say. You might doubt your worth, question if people still care, or fear being forgotten. That's the paradox of long-term loneliness. It intensifies the desire for connection while also breeding hesitation. The longer you are alone, the more vulnerable reaching out begins to feel, and yet the risk is necessary. Healing begins where connection resumes. In solitude, you begin to reflect on the quality of past relationships. You start to see clearly who truly valued you and who merely filled space. Some connections, you realize, were shallow, transactional, or toxic. Others were more meaningful than you gave them credit for. This clarity helps you redefine what kind of connection you truly need, not just quantity, but depth. You begin to long for authenticity over popularity, mutual care over surface-level content. This shift prepares you for a deeper, more intentional kind of relationship moving forward. Ultimately, the need for connection becomes not just about companionship, but about identity. We learn who we are not just through introspection, but through interaction. Other people reflect parts of us we cannot see alone. They challenge us, affirm us, and offer perspectives that help us grow. In isolation, you may discover parts of yourself, but in connection, those parts are tested, refined, and made real. Loneliness may remind you of the importance of others, but connection gives you the chance to fully live and be alive in the presence of another. Solitude is a double-edged sword. On one side, it offers a vast and unfiltered canvas where the mind can explore, imagine, and invent. On the other, it opens the door to darker, more destructive impulses that often go unnoticed in the busyness of daily life. When you're alone for a long time, your inner world becomes the only world you truly live in, and that world, rich as it may be, can either build something beautiful or quietly collapse under its own weight. In solitude, the distractions that normally divide your attention vanish. There are no conversations to keep pace with, no social obligations to meet, no external validation to chase. What's left is time, uninterrupted, raw, and powerful. This time can become fertile ground for creativity. Writers begin books, artists sketch what's inside their minds. Musicians hear melodies that silence finally makes audible. Without the noise of the outside world, the internal voice grows louder, and if you listen carefully, it often has something original to say. Some of the most significant works of literature, music, science, and philosophy were birthed in solitude. From Newton's theories during the plague to Thoreau's meditations in the woods, history shows that extended time alone can sharpen insight and unlock genius. Creation thrives in silence when the creator is willing to face their thoughts and give them form. You may discover talents you didn't know you had. You may revisit dreams you set aside. Solitude can be a crucible for self-expression if you approach it with curiosity and discipline. But creativity doesn't arise automatically. It requires direction. Without purpose or structure, that same solitude can quickly turn toxic. The mind, with no outlet and no engagement, can spiral inward. Thoughts begin to loop, and pessimism may set in. Doubts that once came and went now stay longer. echo louder. You begin to question not only what you're doing, but why you matter at all. The same silence that can help you paint a masterpiece can also convince you you're wasting your life. This is the destructive potential of solitude. In this way, time alone acts as an amplifier. Whatever thoughts and emotions dominate your inner world begin to expand. A small anxiety becomes a looming fear. A moment of sadness becomes a persistent weight. If you're not careful, isolation becomes an echo chamber where only your worst beliefs about yourself are heard. And because there's no one else to challenge those thoughts or offer a different perspective, they begin to feel real, even inevitable. Many fall into this trap not because they are weak, but because they are human. That's why intentional solitude is so important. If you don't shape your time alone, it will shape you. This is the difference between being alone and being adrift. Purpose gives direction to solitude. Without it, your mental energy may turn inward in ways that are corrosive rather than creative. Instead of building something with your hands, you tear yourself apart with your thoughts. Instead of writing, you ruminate. Instead of planning, you panic. The mind, like any tool, needs to be guided or it becomes dangerous in its aimlessness. But even in darkness, there is a strange form of power. Despair itself can become fuel for creation. Some of the most moving art, poetry, and music is born, not from joy, but from pain. In solitude, you may face your demons, but you can also write about them, draw them, name them. Giving shape to suffering is a form of healing. It turns chaos into meaning. It doesn't make the pain disappear, but it transforms it into something others can understand, relate to, and be comforted by. In this way, the destructive potential of solitude can be redirected into profound creative expression. Ultimately, solitude magnifies your intention. If you enter it passively, it may consume you, but if you enter it with awareness and purpose, it becomes a workshop for your mind and soul. It is not about producing a masterpiece, but about engaging with yourself honestly. Solitude gives you space to create, to destroy, to rebuild, and through this cycle, something new begins to take shape. Whether that something is art, understanding, or a version of yourself you've never met before, it comes from the raw materials only solitude can expose. One of the most unexpected gifts of long-term solitude is the sharp clarity it brings to your relationships. In the stillness, when daily interactions fall away and the constant hum of social noise fades, you begin to see people more clearly, not through the lens of habit or convenience, but through the lens of truth. Solitude functions like a magnifying glass over your past and present connections. It reveals which relationships nourished you, which drained you, and which were simply filling space in your life without meaning or purpose. In the absence of regular communication, you become acutely aware of who notices your silence. Days may pass, then weeks, and you begin to see who checks in, not out of obligation, but out of genuine care. You might be surprised. Sometimes the people you expected to reach out stay quiet, and those you hadn't considered deeply before emerge as thoughtful and consistent. Solitude strips away performative friendships and exposes the real ones. It's not always a comforting realization, but it is a necessary one. This time alone allows you to step back from the emotional noise that often clouds judgment. When you're constantly in the presence of others, it's easy to overlook red flags, excuse unhealthy behavior, or mistake proximity for loyalty. But when the connection goes quiet, you have the space to evaluate it without pressure. You start asking harder questions. Was I truly happy in that friendship or just afraid to be alone? Did I feel seen and understood or just tolerated? Reflection replaces reaction, and from that comes clarity. You may also begin to revisit past relationships, not with bitterness, but with curiosity. Memories resurface, conversations that stayed with you, moments of betrayal, acts of kindness you didn't fully appreciate. In solitude, you have the mental room to process these events without interruption. You may find yourself forgiving people you once resented or realizing that some wounds still need attention. Relationship clarity is not only about current ties, it's also about rewriting how you interpret the past and in turn, how you carry it. As this emotional inventory unfolds, you begin to reassess your own role in your relationships. Solitude doesn't just reveal who others are, it reveals who you've been. You may recognize patterns, a tendency to give too much, to remain silent when you should speak up, to chase validation, or to disappear emotionally when things get hard. With no one around to blame or distract you, You're left with your own reflection. That self-awareness, while difficult, is the first step toward forming healthier connections in the future. Perhaps most importantly, solitude forces you to confront your needs, what you actually want in a relationship. Not just romantic ones, but friendships, familial bonds, partnerships. Without external voices influencing your opinion, you start to get honest about what you require, be it loyalty, depth, laughter, stability, or freedom. The vague sense of dissatisfaction you once felt in some relationships now has words and shape. You realize that not everyone has to stay in your life, and that releasing certain people is not cruelty, it's growth. Over time, your idea of closeness may change. You begin to value presence over performance, consistency over intensity. A single check-in from someone who genuinely listens can begin to mean more than 100 conversations filled with empty words. You stop chasing connection for the sake of having it and begin seeking alignment instead. Solitude reveals that the depth of relationship is far more important than its frequency. It shifts your focus from popularity to authenticity. Eventually, the clarity gained in solitude begins to influence how you re-enter the social world. You return not with the same eagerness to fill every seat at your table, but with a more thoughtful eye on who belongs there. You no longer fear outgrowing people or choosing distance when necessary. You understand that true relationships don't dissolve in silence. They withstand it. And from this space of stillness, you start to build connections that are not only stronger, but more true to who you've become. When you're surrounded by others all the time, colleagues, family, friends, digital connections, it's easy to move through life on autopilot. You make decisions quickly, react to circumstances, and follow routines without deeply questioning why you're doing what you're doing. But long-term solitude interrupts that rhythm. Without the constant feedback and influence of others, you are left with a profound and sometimes uncomfortable question echoing through the silence. What am I doing this for? This question, which is often buried under the noise of daily life, becomes impossible to ignore. The initial stages of solitude may feel like disorientation. Without the structure of external schedules or societal pressures guiding your choices, your days begin to blur. You wake up and realize there's no one expecting anything of you. Not your time, not your output, not your presence. And while this may seem freeing at first, it quickly becomes challenging. You begin to notice how much of your identity has been wrapped in productivity or obligation. Without those external goals, you're forced to create your own, authentically and from scratch. This shift is both painful and powerful. You start to evaluate what parts of your life were driven by genuine purpose and which were motivated by expectations, fear, or inertia. Did you really want that job, or were you chasing stability? Was that relationship fulfilling, or were you afraid of being alone? In solitude, there's no audience to perform for, no voices to drown your inner one out. The quiet gives you space to question your path, and sometimes the answers shake the very foundation you've been standing on. You may begin to rediscover parts of yourself that had been buried. Passions that once thrilled you might resurface. Hobbies long abandoned may call to you again. Goals you never pursued because they didn't make sense to others now appear in a new light. Purpose realignment isn't always about finding something new. It's often about remembering what mattered to you before the world told you to be someone else. Solitude offers the rare chance to reconnect with your original self, the version of you untouched by external pressure. But realigning your purpose doesn't happen overnight. It comes through days of confusion, moments of insight, and long periods of introspection. You might write in journals, walk in silence, revisit childhood dreams, or ask yourself difficult questions. The answers aren't always clear, and sometimes you'll feel more lost than when you began. But that lostness is part of the realignment. It's the letting go of old paths that no longer serve you. It's the internal recalibration that eventually points you towards something more true. As you refine your inner compass, even small decisions begin to shift. What you choose to read, watch, create, or consume becomes more intentional. You may find yourself making different career choices, setting new boundaries, or walking away from roles that no longer resonate with your evolving values. There's a quiet empowerment that comes from this clarity. not flashy or dramatic, but grounded in the knowledge that you're no longer just drifting, but moving with direction, even if that direction is still forming. This kind of realignment often leads to the discovery that purpose is not a single destination, but a series of evolving intentions. Being alone teaches you to adapt, to revise your goals, and to stay curious about who you're becoming. It removes the illusion that your purpose must be externally validated or permanently fixed. Instead, you begin to view it as a living force, something you nurture, question, and return to as life changes. This mindset fosters resilience because it's rooted in self-awareness rather than rigid ambition. Ultimately, solitude becomes a space of alignment not just with your goals, but with your values, your truth, and your sense of meaning. It strips away distractions and allows you to see, often for the first time, where your energy truly wants to go. And once you begin to act from that place, however uncertain or small the steps, you feel something shift inside. It's not comfort necessarily. It's not certainty either. It's something deeper. The quiet knowing that you are walking toward a life that belongs entirely to you. Long-term solitude does something few experiences can. It strips you down to the core of who you are. When you are alone for an extended period, the masks you wear, whether social, professional, or emotional, begin to fall away. There is no one left to impress, no roles to perform, no expectations to meet. What remains is the raw version of you, the unpolished, unfiltered self that exists beneath all the labels. This is the beginning of personal transformation. It's not glamorous or immediate. It's slow, quiet, and often uncomfortable. In the absence of external affirmation, you begin to wrestle with your own sense of worth. You start to ask yourself, who am I when no one is watching? Am I enough without applause, without validation, without praise? These are not easy questions. At first, the silence of solitude can feel like rejection, like you've been left behind. But over time, that silence becomes a mirror, one that forces you to see the parts of yourself you've ignored, denied, or depended on others to complete. It's a mirror that doesn't flatter, but it doesn't lie. Personal transformation through solitude is often catalyzed by discomfort. You face parts of yourself you don't like. Insecurities, regrets, fears, guilt. There's no one to distract you from them, no schedule busy enough to silence the whispers. But facing them is where the change begins. Instead of running from your weaknesses, you sit with them. Instead of numbing pain, you examine it. You learn that growth doesn't come from avoidance, but from honest confrontation. And once you stop hiding from yourself, you start evolving. This journey isn't just about healing wounds. It's about discovering strengths you didn't know you had. Resilience, for example, often reveals itself in isolation. You learn how to soothe yourself, how to sit through uncomfortable emotions, how to get through hard days without falling apart. When no one is there to lean on, you become your own support system. That kind of self-reliance doesn't make you cold or disconnected. It makes you solid. You begin to trust yourself more deeply because you've seen what you're capable of enduring. As your internal world reshapes, so does your perception of the external world. You become more discerning about what you allow into your life. You begin to notice which habits, thoughts, and influences are beneficial and which ones undermine your well-being. Transformation in this sense is also about subtraction. You let go of what no longer fits, even if you once clung to it. You start to strip away identities that were built on fear or expectation and begin forming one that's grounded in authenticity. Through this process, your values often change. What once seemed urgent begins to feel trivial. What once seemed impossible now seems necessary. You become less reactive and more reflective. Your goals start to align with your inner convictions rather than external trends. This quiet but radical shift in mindset signals that the transformation is not just surface level, it's structural. You're not just adjusting how you live, you are redefining why you live the way you do. Another element of personal transformation is how your capacity for empathy and understanding deepens. Having experienced your own silent battles, you're better able to recognize and honor them in others. Solitude humbles you. It reminds you of your fragility, your complexity, your contradictions. And through that humility comes a more compassionate heart. You're less likely to judge others quickly, more willing to offer patience and grace. Transformation makes you softer and stronger at the same time. Eventually, you begin to feel a quiet power growing inside you. Not boastful, not loud, but steady. It's the power of knowing who you are, not because someone told you, but because you sat in the silence and met yourself. It's the power of choosing your path intentionally, of speaking with your own voice, of standing in your own presence without needing to be filled or fixed. This is the essence of personal transformation, not becoming someone new, but remembering and reclaiming the truest version of yourself. So if you are alone for a long time, don't rush to escape it. Don't panic in the silence or numb yourself with noise. Instead, pay attention because something is happening even if you can't see it right away. You are being reshaped slowly, subtly. Your thoughts, your values, your understanding of yourself and others are shifting. You are shedding illusions, rewriting beliefs, and rebuilding your inner foundation. Yes, solitude can be uncomfortable. It can be heavy, but it can also be sacred. It can clear the fog from your mind, expose the truth of your heart, and redirect your life toward a path that is more real, more meaningful, and more aligned with who you truly are. What begins as loneliness often becomes clarity. What feels like isolation can lead to insight, and what seems like emptiness may in time become the fertile ground for your most honest transformation. So if you are alone for a long time, soon you will see, soon you will change, soon you will become. Would you like this formatted as a full speech with the introduction and all 7 points as well?